Welcome back to another episode of a Modern Man podcast. I'm your host, JD Farrell, and we are presented to you by the Modern Podcast Network. Today we are talking about stimulus checks and if they should become a regular thing, and kind of what is the role of our government. Hope you enjoy it. So we're going to start today's podcast talking about stimulus checks. Right now, the Senate will soon get the bill passed from the House of Representatives to put forth another $1,400 stimulus into the American economy. We initially received a $1,200 stimulus, weeks after the pandemic came upon us? Never in the history of our democracy has the government sent direct payments. But we had a bipartisan agreement weeks after the pandemic to come up with a $2 trillion stimulus fund. This stimulus fund gave $1,200 to anyone who made, I believe, less than $100,000 a year for a single individual. Or maybe it was 75. And then for couples that made less than, I believe, 150,000, they got 2,400, and then 600 per dependent. Yes, it was revolutionary, but it did not only help people who are in dire need of money right then. It gave extra unemployment insurance because the amount of people who were laid off overnight was tremendous. And someone who's laid off in New York City or San Francisco or Boston is not making the same money as someone who's laid off in Oklahoma or Alabama or Arkansas. So yes, that person in Arkansas is getting that extra $600 unemployment, but it's for the people in Boston and LA and San Francisco. Also during this time, this $2 trillion bill gave billions of dollars to hospitals because they were fighting COVID relief. Or COVID-19, sorry, they needed COVID relief. This $1 trillion stimulus gave money to airlines because they were losing millions and billions of dollars due to the economy and no one travel and travel restrictions. It gave billions, I believe it was close to $400 billion to small businesses. And yes, it sucks that these businesses were shut down, but they literally gave out a loan that they didn't have to pay back to small businesses. And the same thing with the unemployment insurance. There's people in small states, South Dakota, North Dakota, the Kansas of the world, who are making more or twice as much than they were making because of the pandemic, the extra unemployment insurance. But that person in New York or Miami is making half as what they are making. Look at the small businesses. Some of the small businesses, quote unquote small, are getting these loans. Not all of them need it. Some businesses, such as my uncle's, was even more profitable during the pandemic. But if someone's giving you assistance and a loan and a grant, are you going to turn it down? No. So yes, there's always going to be discrepancies in people who need the money more. But the goal was we came together and we needed the money. We needed something to be done, and something happened. And that moves on to my next point. I think that stimulus checks should become the standard. The government has proven that they can give money directly to the people who need it, and that's really what we need in this country. The first person, obviously someone probably did it before him, but the past year or two, Andrew Yang has been the loudest voice I've heard about giving a base universal income. And he was preaching for, I believe it was $1,200 a month, standard to send to families to help increase the wage gap. I don't know if that would work, but if you lived anywhere in the continental United States the last couple weeks, you were most likely hit with the blizzard that came through. From Texas to Illinois to Tennessee, millions and millions of damage, millions of people without power, millions of people affected. Just like a pandemic that hits us and we can send out direct stimulus, I think the standard moving forward should be natural disasters that have widespread effect should be treated as the pandemic and be treated with stimulus. Yes, this sounds like someone asking for a handout, but that isn't what this is. No. Yes, you have insurance for these things, but most people in America live paycheck to paycheck. So yes, you want to say you have an emergency fund, but most people don't have the emergency fund to pay for $1,000 purchase. So I get it. Even if you do have this emergency fund, that's for if you specifically had a situation that occurred in your life. If there is any type of a natural disaster that affects a whole state, a whole city with millions or hundreds of thousands of people, I think that's bigger than a you problem. I think that's a problem that the government should step in, and that's where their role comes into play. Because when else do we need the government if not in dire situations? So yes, if you were running and broke your leg or, had a car accident and something happened, that's what your emergency fund is for. But if your entire city, if not state, sometimes region is affected, then I think the government should intervene. Just look at the past couple years because of climate change. Just saying this will become a regular occurrence due to climate change, which we are all a part of the problem. And once again, we need to all be a part of the solution. But blizzards are increasing, ice storms, the wildfires, hurricanes. Look at Harvey and Irma. Look at just this past summer in the Gulf. The floods. These things are becoming a regular occurrence. And like I said, if it was you and one person had a car accident, had a medical expense, that's what your emergency fund is. But if millions of people are affected, I think that's when the government needs to step in. And once again, we don't need $1,200 stimulus for this, but let's round up a couple things that you might lose if, let's just say, a blizzard comes through and you're out of commission for a few days. So we have loss of wages. So if most people are living paycheck to paycheck, and let's just take the little bit over the minimum wage, like a $10 an hour, $8, that's, $80 right there. And just say you miss 2 shifts, almost $200. The loss of food. A single person just paid $60, $70 for groceries that week. A family of 4 to 5, that could be $200, $300. All went bad because the fridge. And then we want our people to be healthy. Do we want them to have to eat that food's that bad? No, we should give our people the chance to have fresh food after a natural disaster hits them. They shouldn't have to worry about, oh, was that milk sitting out at room temperature for 2 days, but I can't afford to go buy another gallon? Look at the damages to property. And yes, you have insurance, but then you might have to go stay in a hotel and that payment, and then the damages to health. And yes, that is what insurance is for, but then you have the deductible. And once again, if something happens to you specifically, I get it. That's why you have that's why you have these backup plans, these emergency funds. But if it happens to hundreds of thousands, millions of people, then I think that's when the government should step in. Maybe I'm crazy, though. Maybe I the one who's wrong here. But I feel, what else is the government there for? Not if all the people, all the tax-paying citizens are in need of your assistance, or a large majority of your tax-paying citizens are in need of your assistance. And just like in the CARES Act, when they sent billions of dollars to state and local government, they can do a state of emergency and send another $1 billion to whatever regional areas of the country were affected by a natural disaster, and those states can distribute the funds to the people. Because at the end of the day, that's really what this is about. Because the same people who didn't want a shutdown when the pandemic hit, it's because they needed income. But if we provide people with income, then they're more willing to stay home and listen. But no, I get it. People have bills to pay. Thank you for tuning in to a Modern Man podcast. I'm your host, JD Farrell. We're presented to you by the Modern Podcast Network. You can catch me later this week. We're picking back up Fargo Watch Party. We had to skip an episode because of the whole, storm. Didn't have Wi-Fi for 10 plus days, but we'll be back this week. So please rate, review, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.